So, I've been going through some tough times myself, and I stumbled upon a new book I found called The Happiness Trap, which was completely unexpected to me. I've known about other types of therapies like CBT that ask you to challenge your thoughts and argue with them, which can be kind of annoying. And some people in self-improvement or whatever say to lift weights or go into monk mode. But the technique used in this book is fundamentally different. You might think it's the same advice, but it's really not. It really worked me for a little bit, and I'm not saying it's gonna completely fix your life, and that's okay. At least it might make it a bit less worse. So this book is about acceptance and commitment therapy, also known as ACT. Wide range of problems. It was developed in the mid-1980s by psychologist Stephen C. Hayes and his colleagues, and this therapy can treat issues from depression, addiction, anxiety disorders, psychosis, chronic pain, and even trauma. And it's also used to help people adjust to chronic illnesses and disability, and to build meaningful and rewarding lives even in the face of serious ongoing health issues. But the TLDR of it is that it tells you to learn just living with your thoughts and feelings as words floating in your head and focusing more on the real world instead. To start with all of this, you need to know that life is not fair. Some people have horrific childhoods, having been abused, neglected, or abandoned by their caregivers, whereas others grow up in loving, supporting families. Some live in extreme poverty while others live in good housing conditions, but people on both sides of that gulf are human and share many things in common, including the fact that no matter how privileged or disadvantaged we may be, we're all naturally predisposed to psychological suffering. Anxiety disorders are actually more prevalent than you might think. There are studies indicating that nearly 30% of people experience one at some point of their life. Substance use disorders are also widespread, impacting about 9% of the population. And all of those common forms of suffering that are not considered psychological disorders, quote unquote, nonetheless make us miserable, like stress, performance anxiety, conflict, sickness, injury, aging, poverty, bullying, self-doubt, blah, 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 blah. So there is no such thing as lasting happiness, which naturally begs the question, why is it so hard to be happy? Well, we are hardwired to suffer psychologically, to compare, evaluate, and criticize ourselves, to focus on what we're lacking, and to rapidly become dissatisfied with what we have. And you imagine all sorts of frightening scenarios, most of which will never even happen. And this is all rooted in our brain trying to keep us safe. Our brain wants us to survive and instead of being happy. So most people believe that happiness is our natural state, quote unquote, but these studies clearly show this is just not the case. So what is natural for human beings is to experience an ever-changing flow of emotions depending on where we are and what's happening. Our emotions and feelings can be kind of like weather. They keep changing from moment to moment. You don't expect it to be warm and sunny all day long, all year round. The same thing with emotions. If we live a full human life, we will feel the full range of human emotions, the good ones and the bad ones. And all these feelings are pretty normal, a pretty normal part of being human. Painful thoughts and feelings, we often feel ashamed or even embarrassed about it, or we think it is our fault and that we're weak or immature. But in this ACT therapy, there is a totally different assumption, which says that if you're not happy, you're normal, because life is just tough and full of challenges. It would probably be weird if we felt happy all the time. The things that make life meaningful come with a whole range of feelings. For example, if you think of a close relationship, it can go well and you can experience wonderful feelings like love, but sooner or later, even in the best relationships, you will experience conflict, disappointment, and frustration. And by the way, there is really no such thing as a perfect relationship, let alone that soulmate delusion or BFF concepts. Again, what is happiness? Most people will say it's a good feeling, some pleasurable feeling of some joy or contentment. The ancient Greeks, by the way, had a special word for a life based on the pursuit of happy feelings, Hedonia, from which we get the word hedonism. We all enjoy pleasurable feelings, so it's not that surprising that we chase them. They are fleeting. They just come and go. So no matter how hard we try to hold on to them, they just never hang around for long. That's the hedonic treadmill.
You can sometimes see it when people have, I don't know where, achievements, people suddenly achieve something and think, wow, yeah. That's a high, and it won't last for very long.
But there is another meaning of happiness that's much more different. The experience of living a rich and meaningful life. And the ancient Greeks came with the word Eudaimonia, which is often translated as flourishing. When we live our lives in this way, we will surely have many pleasurable feelings, and we'll also have many difficult ones, of course, like anxiety and guilt. Because, again, life is difficult. There is just no escape of this fact. Sooner or later, we will all grow old, get sick, and die. We will all lose important relationships through rejection, separation, or death, and we will all come face to face with crisis, disappointment, and failure. So this means that in one form or another, we're all going to experience a bunch of painful thoughts and feelings. And you obviously can't control them. If you think you do, well, try not to think about a polar bear. Go ahead, pause this video, do whatever. So, you just can't do it. You know, self-help books say that it's easy to replace negative emotions with positive ones through affirmations, quote unquote, but maybe they'll make you feel better, at least temporarily, and it's just not going to last in the long run. We've been told that we should control our feelings in school when we were called crybabies, quote unquote, especially as guys. We might have heard people tell us to get over it or calm down. So many of us just act or get hooked on the thoughts and feelings of our brain, letting it dictate what we should do. So we either obey our brain or struggle against it. In obey mode, you essentially let your thoughts judge you and control you to do everything they say, so which can include things you don't like but feel you should do, and this was once called masturbation. And in struggle mode, we tend to try to block our thoughts, escape from them, or argue with them, which brings these thoughts back even stronger. It's like scratching an itch. The scratching that is thought to be the solution, quote unquote, becomes part of the problem. And this is called a vicious cycle.
I hate Isato, and I hate Shinji, and I hate their first child, bitch Ray! I hate my dad! I hate my mom! My boss lady! Most of all, I hate them! Why do I have to do this? Why me?
Let's check some ways used in struggle mode. I don't want you to judge yourself on this. We're just gonna get curious about it, okay? So we've got distraction, we've got opting out, you got thinking strategies and substances, self-harming, suicidal ideation, watching this very video, and many other stuff. Now, I know that for some of these methods, if used moderately and wisely, they can improve life in the long run, so they're toward moves. But when we overuse or overly rely on these methods, they have significant long-term costs. So you have to ask yourself, how was this worked for you in the long term? Were you able to get rid of those unwanted thoughts and feelings, and did they never come back? How many of these methods give you relief from pain in the short term, but keep you stuck and make your life worse in the long term? So please take some time to answer this and in your head or whatever, and take a moment. Okay, so if you were truly honest with yourself, you would discover that you've invested a lot of time and energy in struggle, trying to avoid or get rid of unwanted thoughts and feelings. Many of these strategies gave you short-term relief from those unwanted thoughts, but they return in the long term. And many of these strategies, when used excessively, have significant costs in terms of wasted time and energy. In other words, they made you feel better in the short term, but in the long term, they lowered your quality of life. And this is the happiness trap, by the way. So notice what your mind is saying right now. Is it saying something encouraging or helpful, or is it just judging you or calling you stupid? It's maybe the latter. And if so, don't worry about it. Please don't worry. You're not stupid, even if your mind disagrees with me, because literally everybody uses these same strategies. We all try to distract ourselves. Everybody opts out of things and that are difficult. Everybody tries to think his way out of pain, and everybody puts substances in his body. So no matter how hard we try to avoid these thoughts and feelings, they just keep coming back. So it's a vicious cycle, which we all get stuck in at times. But when you do things because they are truly meaningful to you, like deep in your heart, they truly matter to you, then they are not struggle strategies, but values-guided actions, quote-unquote, which I'll talk about in a moment. If these very same actions are motivated by avoidance, like their primary purpose is to avoid or get rid of unwanted thoughts and feelings, I don't need to tell you what they are called then. What can we do to escape this happiness trap is that we'll need to use an ACT skill called dropping anchor, which helps to hold yourself steady when experiencing different thoughts and feelings. And there are many ways of doing it, but one method we can remember is the acronym ACE. A, acknowledge your thoughts and feelings. C, connect with your body. And E, engage in what we're doing. Before we practically start doing it, let's just take a few moments to reflect on something that's difficult in your life today, which triggers some difficult thoughts and feelings, so you have something to work with. Take around 20 seconds to notice what thoughts are popping out in your head, and around 10 to 30 seconds to scan your body from head to toe. Then use a term like, I'm noticing, or here is, to name whatever you notice. Even if you don't know what you're feeling, you're probably just feeling numb. And the aim here is to acknowledge your thoughts and feelings without obeying them and without struggling against them. You're aiming for simply acknowledging that here and now, in this moment, these thoughts and feelings exist. So do this for at least 20 to 30 seconds, and we'll move on to the next step in a moment. Okay, C. Now keep acknowledging these thoughts and feelings while simultaneously connecting with your physical body, like pushing your feet gently into the floor, gently straightening your back and spine, or stretching your arms, neck, or rolling your shoulders. You can do it as you wish, really. Maybe even breathe in and out slowly, or raise your eyebrows as high as you can, then lower them. Remember that you're not trying to get rid of those thoughts and feelings, so it's normal if you still don't feel better at all. Nor are you trying to distract yourself from them. The aim, again, is to give you more control over your physical actions, aka over what you can do with your arms and hands, legs and face and mouth, etc., so that you can act more effectively while the emotional storm continues to rage. So please do this right now for at least 10 to 20 seconds. E. Now you want to continue acknowledging your thoughts and feelings and connecting with your body, but also get a sense of where you are and what's going on. And then focus your attention on the activity you're doing. It can be something like noticing 5 things you can see, 3 things you can hear, what you can smell or sense inside your nose or mouth, etc., etc. Again, please do this now to take around 10 to 20 seconds. Alright, we're not done yet. Please just run through the 8 steps again. Acknowledge your thoughts and feelings, connect with your body, engage in what you're doing. Take at least 10 to 15 seconds for each step. Okay, now if you want to, you can actually do it again for a 3rd time and a 2nd time. Same thing, 10 to 15 seconds for each step. And yeah, they're pretty good. So what happened now? Hopefully you experienced that you were able to separate from your thoughts and feelings a bit and had a greater awareness of where you are, whether and what you're doing and what you're thinking and feeling. Now, it's very likely you might say that it's not working, but again, the aim of it is to gain more control over your physical actions, to detach a bit from our thoughts and feelings and to interrupt any way we get lost inside our heads. The aim, as I said before, is not to distance ourselves. Negative emotions are normal. Negative thoughts are normal. Our minds all do the same thing, and this is part of being human, as I said before. So you're hooked when it seems like your thoughts give you commands or rules you must follow, that they are very important or that they are the truth, or when they judge you to give you reasons to spare you from uncomfortable thoughts and feelings or from trying out new things that cause you get hurt. Your thoughts can sometimes be true, absolutely, but the important question here is whether these thoughts are useful or not. So just assume that your negative thoughts stopped existing. What would you do? Your thoughts are nothing more or less than words, like some annoying person sitting next to you. Even if that person says the truth, if those words are telling us something useful that can help us, then it's probably not worth paying attention to. And if it's not, why bother? So you might think, what if that thought is actually helpful and will motivate me to do something, as in reverse psychology or whatever? Maybe they can, but the cost of relying on this form of motivation is huge. Even when they kick you into action, they often have the opposite effects. That's what happens with the perfectionism thing. If you slack off just one time, the brain is just going to judge you mercilessly. And this reminds me, by the way, of all those self-improvement cults where they tell you, if you play 1 hour, just 1 hour of video games, somebody else have already impregnated your future wife.
If you slow down and say that it's okay to play 1 hour of video games, the guy who's right behind you, who you were gonna beat, but you slowed down to play 1 hour of video games, crosses and he beats you. And then he takes your future wife and he impregnates her. Any man who is trying to convince you to slow down in the race of men is trying to fuck your future wife. They're at the bottom of this bucket trying to pull you back. Anime's fine. I'm just going crazy. 1 hour of video games. Shut up. Look back down that bucket, bro. Punch him in the fucking nose, bro. Fucking anime profile pictures. They've always got a lot to say, don't they?
But anyway. We can actually drop anchor in many other different ways to unhook ourselves from our thoughts, and this includes thinking our mind. You remember when I said that our brain is like someone who tries to protect us? And this can be something you do, but there are other ways. Another one which you can do is by playing with the text, by just goofing around with the letters and words and maybe adding some animations to them, which I couldn't do here. And another technique is using silly voices. You can find a self-critical thought and buy into it as much as you can for about 10 seconds. And for me, one of the most disturbing moments was that clip where Asuka shouted at Shinji,
"Nobody understands me!"
What are you, stupid? Of course nobody understands you. Nobody can ever understand you.
and specifically with her voice, I go like, no, in my head, just to struggle with that voice. But if we replace that voice with SpongeBob's or some other silly character, maybe things will go slightly differently.
What are you, stupid? Of course nobody understands you. Nobody could ever understand you.
Again, maybe these thoughts are true and serious. One of them, personally for me, was feeling inferior to a 17-year-old in something, but that was nothing. Just don't think about it, really. But again, our point is, does this thought offer you anything useful? Can it help you make the most out of life? That's the question you have to ask yourself. Now, these unhooking techniques that I mentioned are just some examples. Of course, you can use your own or whatever suits you really. But just remember to keep in mind that you're not doing this to get rid of unpleasant thoughts, but to see them as they are. Don't expect to feel better when doing it, even if it might often happen and no technique is foolproof. Sometimes these unhooking techniques will fail, so you might just apply the ACE formula instead. And remember also that you're human and that you're gonna forget all of what I'm saying, and that's okay. But once you realize you're hooked, even if it's been happening for hours, just go use one of these techniques. Now we can move to another section, which is about taking your life in a new and meaningful direction. Difficult thoughts and feelings arise. This is because as your mind gives you warnings to keep you safe, quote unquote, it stops you from doing what matters, and you keep doing the same thing. So some people call it staying in your comfort zone, or more like the misery zone. I'm not going to talk about setting goals, whatever, the self-improvement crap, because it's likely you don't know what you want to do already, which is, again, totally fine. It happened to me as well. I'm not going to talk about... I have to mention this, by the way, even if you believe you are utterly useless, even if you feel completely powerless and just stuck in bed, the universe would have never, ever been the same without you. As you might sometimes think that you wish you were never born or that you want to end your life. You need to remember that you're literally a co-author of the universe. Just how incredible is this? I'm not going to sugarcoat anything or say that you have infinite potential or that you're going to change the world by improving yourself or keep improving or whatever. But you need to remember that just by existing, literally just existing, let alone doing something small for someone or something, you change the timeline and the trajectory of the universe. I know that sounds a bit awkward since it does seem like if you die, the world would just never change, but I think of it as some kind of butterfly effect. But keep in mind that you don't need to have ambitious goals or improve yourself or have some title or anything like that. Anyway, going back to our topic, you need to know that you're already luckier than millions and millions of people who would wish so badly to be in your shoes. You see, in a refugee camp, for example, people there just can't get a paid job or have delicious food or live in a house instead of a tent, and so on and so forth. If you become obsessed with achieving outcome goals that are, at least for now, unachievable, you become frustrated or even hopeless because you're not getting what you want. That's why before you ever think about any goal, you need to look at your values, because you can live with your values right here, right now, in 1,000 different ways, even if your goals are just impossible. So let's say, for example, that your goal is to get a paid job, not a wage cut one, so that you can support the people you care about. If your values are to be kind and productive, then even if it is impossible to reach your goal, you can still live with your values in any little way you find. I know this sounds like cope, but the more preoccupied you are with what you can control, the more miserable and hopeless you become. Your values connect you with what you can control, the ability to act the sort of person you want to be. And the only way you can influence the world is through your actions, to what you can do with your arms and legs and speech. And the more you take control over your actions, the more you can influence the world around you. Now, of course, I'm not saying you should give up on your goals. I'll talk about this part in a moment. But know that values are more powerful than goals, and that you can always live with those values no matter how life is. For example, if you have a terminal illness, you can still be kind and caring for yourself, even if you'll never achieve the goal of achieving good health. So you can mentally note some of your values. Some of common ones are shown on the screen, and this is not to tell you what is right for you or not. It's just to give you some ideas, some inspiration. So you might add some of your own instead. Now, let's imagine that your difficult thoughts and feelings lose their power over you. What will you continue doing or stop avoiding? How differently are you going to treat yourself? This might make you anxious. That's okay. They will repeatedly appear, your thoughts, but this is just a little mental exercise to give you an idea of how we can unhook ourselves from our thoughts. Just try to play around with them, and you might change your mind or whatever. Also, you're not obliged to apply everything in this video in just one sitting. You might need to replay it or some parts of it, and that's totally okay. So one of our first steps to apply our values is through self-compassion, which is simply being honest with ourselves about the pain we're in without wallowing in it, because self-pity just makes things worse and never really helps. It's about acknowledging the pain you have in a simple and kind way, just like how you do it for a friend. And this is something you already somewhat practice in the acknowledge phase of ACE, where you were noticing your difficult thoughts and feelings. This self-compassion helps you cope with stress much better, and it's not some passive response to life challenges, but an activity to support yourself, just as you would do for a friend. And one way you can do it, aside from self-talk, is through kind self-touch, like gently hugging yourself, for example. And you can probably do that little thing daily for a while, and it honestly does feel good. Weirdly, I don't know why, but it just feels pretty good when I do this myself. And next, we'll take a look at self-esteem. When you get hooked by the not good enough story, It's just not helpful because most people tell you that you need to look at your good points and build a positive self-image and wait until that not good enough story fades away. Of course, this approach is not going to convince your mind, and you'll just exhaust yourself by continually disproving those not good stories. So the moment you slip up, when you stop doing any of those things that justify you're a good person, quote unquote, your self-judgment attacks relentlessly. Again, this video will not fight with our thoughts or mask them with other ones, but we'll do some cognitive reframing on your self-image. Think of a documentary about Africa, for example. It might give you detailed impressions, but it's not going to give you the real experience, no matter how brilliantly it is filmed. In other words, if you think of the person you love the most, even if it's your waifu, doesn't matter, will you prefer to spend time with that actual living person or a documentary about them? You have to understand that there is a massive difference between who you are and any documentary anyone could ever make about you, no matter how truthful it may be, because all documentaries are biased. They just only show a tiny part of the big pictures. Same thing happens with the mind. The self-concept or self-image can be a good thing to have since it enables you to reflect on yourself, but you'll want to hold that self-concept lightly and not let it hook you. You don't want to obey this self-concept, nor do you want to struggle against it, because neither response will be helpful for you on the long term. Just see them for what they are. Thoughts, images, sensations coming and going on that ever-changing stage show of your life. So what needs to be done is to accept that you're human and therefore imperfect. I know this is easier said than done. It does hurt to think about some negative parts of yourself, let alone the past. That's why we need self-compassion, which I mentioned before. Acknowledging how painful it is to be human, thinking your mind, and speaking to yourself with kindness. One way of doing this is by actually taking some time alone and closing your eyes. And this isn't meditation, quote unquote, or anything like that. It's just getting yourself bored enough to clearly acknowledge what is going on in your inner world. You might want to time travel to the past inside your mind and observe the younger version of you. And tell him you know what has happened and that you understand what he's been through, that you are here and want to help in any way you can. And ask the young guy if there's anything he needs or wants from you. Again, all in your head, so you can do anything you want. And he might ask you to bring him somewhere. Or if he just doesn't trust you, then tell him it's fine and say goodbye. Letting him know you might check in again. And this is an example of self-compassion that might help. And you might need to do it regularly. In fact, maybe in some parts of this video. But of course, it's all up to you. Now let's move also to the part about goals, quote unquote. Don't worry or overwhelm yourself about it. We're not going to talk about long-term goals or anything like that for now, but we'll just focus on very small changes in one aspect of life at a time. So if you try to work too hard on too many areas simultaneously, you'll just end up overwhelmed and stressed and then give up. So no matter how difficult our situation is, we always have choices. In whichever one we are, we have three choices. 1, leave. 2, stay and live by your values. 3, stay but do things that make no difference or make it worse. Of course, sometimes you can't always choose option 1. For example, you can't just leave a prison. And if that's the case, the path to a better life lies in option 2. To avoid overwhelming yourself by trying to work on too many things at once, we can divide life into 4 main domains: work, love, play, and health. We're going to work on just one domain at a time, and of course, these domains can overlap with each other, which is probably a good sign since it creates a domino effect. Now, you want to pick one of these domains to work on for the next week, just one of them, because if you try to make many changes at once, you'll probably get overwhelmed and give up. And over time, we'll work on all domains of our life and set medium-term and long-term goals. But don't stress yourself out with that, because we just want to start slowly now. And at your pace, it doesn't really matter how slow you are as long as you're consistent. But this particular goal, along with other goals, should not be too easy either, because we want to slowly pull ourselves out of our comfort zone. We don't want to burn ourselves out, so we need to find a middle ground. And obviously, these goals should be specific, so no emotional ones either, because you need to know that there is nothing that, if you achieve it, will make you just happy. It has to actually be meaningful in itself. And you also need to be realistic and specific about it. This is also known, of course. So if this goal involves quitting a bad habit or something similar, you want to also replace it with another activity instead of just trying to do something a dead person can literally do better than you. So I can guarantee you that you will either achieve it or you will still fail, because you're human. I know this is kind of funny, but you're just perfectly imperfect. And of course, your mind is going to discourage you, especially when this goal involves a bit of discomfort. Don't obey the excuses and reasons to stop you from doing anything, especially those what ifs and I don't know. You might also be having a dilemma and not know what to do, but recognize that there is no perfect solution, and that you're already making a choice. So when you don't change, you're choosing to stay the same. Maybe you might need some silence time to reflect on that with a piece of paper or something, or even use the ACE technique once again. Sometime later, you can ask yourself about medium-term goals that you might pursue in the next weeks or months, which of course should also align with your values. And the same applies to long-term goals, where you can dare to just think big and consider what you can do in the next 3, 4, 5, and even 10 years. Again, be realistic about it. You don't have to worry much about long-term goals, especially if you have no idea, because you're already good to go with just the short-term and medium-term goals. And lastly, you should remember that no one is going to save you. I'm sorry to say that, but this is just the truth. No matter what happens in your life, or whether it's some elites or parents or whoever's fault, it's still your job and your responsibility to deal with what's going on with you. And also remember that if you don't respect yourself, no one will respect you, automatically or not. Never ever try to make people like you by pleasing them or by changing your authentic, genuine self just to reduce their anxiety and discomfort.
Who's gonna save them though? Who's gonna save those girls?
They don't. That's just no. It's not your job to save them. It's not your job to fix the world. It's your job to protect yourself, protect the people around you, generate wealth. That's why you get strong, so you can be a man. Who's gonna do this? Who's gonna do that? Who's gonna whatever? You are. You are the generation of men who are gonna form future society. It's not your job to save people that are unsavable, though. You got to protect yourself first of all.
So anyway, I'll see you later and have a good day.